Welcome to the New York Business Leaders Podcast, presented by the Coyle Group. We interview the most interesting and influential business leaders in New York and hear their stories of success, challenges, and lessons learned while building their businesses and personal brands. New episodes drop weekly, so please be sure to subscribe to get updates in your favorite stream. Without further delay, here's your host of the New York Business Leaders Podcast, Gordon Coyle.
Hey everyone, it's Gordon Coyle. I'm the host of the New York Business Leaders Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. In this show, I welcome my good friend Jon Sheppard from Jon Sheppard and Associates and Daybreak Staffing to talk about recruiting, the new work environment, and a lot of other employment-related matters. Jon is a humble guy, but he's also an eternal optimist. And at the end of the conversation, he says something that I want to repeat here. It may seem like a very challenging time with a lot of uncertainty out there, but it's also a time of great opportunity. It's a time to turn the page from negativity to the positive, and I couldn't agree more. I think it's a great sentiment. I think you're going to enjoy this conversation, whether you're an employer feeling challenged by the changing work environment, or you're an employee looking for that next big opportunity, as well as optimal work-life balance. Lots of great nuggets are going to be found in this convo. If you'd like to reach out to Jon, his email address is jshepard@jsheppardassociates.com. I'll also have that in the show notes for you. Thanks for listening and watching this show. I really appreciate your support. Please give it a thumbs up if you're on YouTube and a 5-star rating if you're listening to this on a podcast platform. Lastly, if you have an interesting story that you'd like to tell on this show, drop me an email and let's chat. My email address is gbcoyle@thecoilegroup.com, and that's also going to appear in the show notes. Now, on to the show. Hey everyone, I'm Gordon Coyle. Welcome to the New York Business Leaders Podcast. Today I've got a good friend, Jon Sheppard, on with me. Jon owns 2 companies in the recruiting and staffing space, and we're going to ask him to introduce that in just a minute. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gordon, and hi, everybody.
Why don't you take a minute now and introduce yourself, your firms, what you do, how you do it, that kind of stuff.
Sure. I am the president and CEO, as well as the owner of Jon Sheppard Associates, a full-service attorney search and executive search firm, as well as Daybreak Staffing, which handles all kinds of support staff people for law firms and corporations. Have been in the recruiting space my entire adult life. Started recruiting when I was 19, worked through the 80s and 90s for other firms, started Jon Sheppard Associates and Daybreak Staffing in the year of 2000. We run a very boutique business, and we are very much of the opinion that the best way to match people to jobs is to match the culture of a particular firm to the needs of an individual.
Fantastic. Great. Thanks. Great. Jon, what I'd like to start with is, can you give us a view from your perspective of the marketplace, maybe from candidates who are looking for positions, as well as from the perspective of employers looking to fill positions?
Sure. It cuts across all lines in the vertical of any position at any firm or company. What candidates are looking for now is an engagement where they have a seat at the table, where they are empowered to do their job without being micromanaged. In the pandemic era that we find themselves in, there are a number of people that want to work remotely on a percentage basis. Not everybody wants to be 100% remote, but not everyone wants to come to an office 5 days a week. On the firm side or the company side of things, they want employees that can push forward the initiatives of the company or the firm. In the case of a law firm, if it's an attorney, obviously a partner with a book of business is preferable to someone without. In the associate ranks, it is a very strong market because all of our law firm clients are extremely busy, even through the pandemic. In the support staff world, people are still trying to figure out workflow, individuals, and how that's all going to get accomplished in the new paradigm.
So one of the questions like you just brought up is the candidates have a view of what work is, which is different than it was 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, and employers may be confused as to what work looks like. How do you mesh the two of those things together? It's got to be very difficult.
It's part of the dynamic that's going on now, Gordon. It's I use the example. I tell people that, in 2020, companies and firms enabled their people to do their jobs. They got them locked in remotely. They gave them access to all company directories and files and everything like that. And they made it work. And they had a very positive 2020 from a profit standpoint. Now we get to 2021, and the employees want to do all those things now to benefit themselves. They want to stay home and do the work. They don't want to have to commute. They want to turn off the computer at a certain point in the day to kind of do something family oriented or personal oriented. And then the dynamic now is not so much about what's happening with the work, it's what's happening with the workflow. And as the company clients or the firm clients dictate that the work's getting accomplished, this is now the new battleground between employers and employees. It's getting to a mutual place of acceptance. I find that place is probably going to be a 3-day in the office, 2-day out of the office hybrid.
Interesting. And I think, excuse me, I think one of the other things we're facing today is different generations working in companies and in law firms that have different, like you just mentioned, different perspectives on what work is, what family time, work-life balance is. And then if you blend in diversity and inclusion and a lot of social issues that younger people are more attentive to than older people are, it must kind of run a strange dynamic when you're trying to put employers and employees together.
It does. For years, I've been talking about the generationality of law firms. People talk about diversity and inclusion all the time. I've sat on diversity and inclusion committees for the Association of Legal Administrators, for the mayor's office. And what I found is that overarching all of it is the generationality. You have 4 generations working together in American business for the very first time ever. You have people well into their 70s who are still highly productive. And then you have the baby boomers, like myself, and then the 2 generations that follow us. And the need set of each of those generations is different. And as management, if you can tap into the need set of each of those generations, you're going to create a stronger, more diverse generational workforce. That type of generational workforce will help you in succession planning as you move from one era to the next. It is, to me, the number one thing that every company should be looking at.
If you work with a very traditional law firm that has senior partners that are in their 70s, let's say, how adaptive are they to this concept of generationality and adaptability to the younger workforce? How does that look today?
There are many challenged leaders out there. There are firms and companies that are doing it well. It's really about education and enlightenment. I think that a lot of people make the mistake that just because you look a certain way, the expectation is a certain thing. I, for example, tell associate attorneys I'm placing, if you look at the leadership team of this 100 attorney law firm, you're going to see a lot of homogenous people that probably look like me on the management committee. But do they have initiatives for women? Do they have initiatives for cultural diversity, for sexual orientation diversity? Who are the players underneath the management committee, the key partners in the firm, the key stakeholders in the company who are really driving the business in the new generation? And if you look at those types of firms and companies and see that even though leadership may act or look one way, if they have the kind of diversity, the multi-generationality I mentioned, you'll see that they're a lot stronger. And the 2, what we'll call younger generations under the age of 50, those 2 generations, they want to see that that's the case. And I talk to those individuals about being the agents of change.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that, if a younger person is looking at the, leadership of a firm and they do see a lot of older, white men with gray hair, they may feel discouraged. But, especially in law firms and other professional service firms, it's only a matter of time that the senior folks retire and get replaced with younger, more diverse workforces. It's nothing that's contrary to today's society. It's just a matter of rotating people in and out, I think. Is that correct?
It's just the march of time.
Yeah.
And, part of that march of time has been the clients of those firms. Who's the general counsel at a large corporation that utilizes a law firm's services? In the past, it was a country club going 50 to 75-year-old white man, right? Who gave out the work. Now, you probably have somebody who's the general counsel who is in their 40s, all kinds of diverse, whether it's culturally or gender-wise or anything else. And you better have individuals inside your firm that look like them, that look like your client, because your client is going to be more apt to give work to a firm that they see shares the value system of that company. So it's driven by the clients of a particular law firm or the consumer of a particular product or good.
Interesting. So you and I have talked about the pandemic and the impact that it had on business today as a great inflection point. Can you give us an insight from both the employer and the employee perspectives?
Sure. It's an inflection point for many reasons. It's not only about, I want to work remotely because I can. You have a number of, for example, baby boomers coming out of the workforce, who maybe were 5 years away from retirement and said, you know what, I'm just going to move closer to my son or daughter and my grandchildren now. So that kind of chips away at the workforce. You have younger generations coming up that won't perform jobs that people that used to come up through the ranks did, say, for example, secretarial jobs. Those people who don't come out of school anymore wanting a secretarial job, they want a business development manager job and they want a seat at the table. And that is something that's driving a lot of the availability of individuals. Firms have to be a little bit more productive, aggressive in attracting people and seeing their potential. I always joke with people, I get accused of thinking more like an investment banker than either an attorney or a recruiter, because I can see the potential. I could say he or she really fits for these reasons. They could do the work, but I believe they fit with you because of your team, because of your culture, because of what their need set looks like and what you're providing. They agree and believe in a lot of the things that you believe in. So the inflection point is here for a lot of reasons. It's, they say the pandemic's been a once in 100 years thing. So is the way that people are changing the way they do business. You will never see ever again a large corporation or a law firm have 100% of their people in the office on a given day at the same time. Those days are over. I talk a lot, Gordon, with people about how my career changed with the pandemic. And I tell people all it did was it sped up my career by 5 years. People were already moving to a platform like this for interviewing. They were already more concerned about who the individuals are instead of can they do the work. They're all expected to be able to do the work. They're expected to have a good education. It's, are they the type of individual we feel good about employing? And that's been going on and always been the way that I've worked. And now I feel like with the pandemic speeding up my career by 5 years, it's just the natural evolution for what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think it accelerated my career and those of the folks that work with me as well. At the beginning, everybody was just in a panic mode of the pandemic, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And then I think gradually it kind of changed our opinions or minds about what work is, how work gets done, where it gets done. And I think it's still evolving. And I think you're right. We're, my team is all working from home. I get the sense that they're kind of like lonely at times, and maybe they want to come back a little bit. And I'm sure that that's true in big companies as well. And we'll see how that all plays out in the coming months and years. But it's kind of an interesting situation. And it kind of leads me into the next question of like, what's next? What do businesses need to do to be competitive for the talent out there? Because, from what I hear and what I see, there's just tremendous demand for talent. And there's a lot of rating of one firm or company's firm to another. And there's a lot of movement. So what are your insights around what's coming up next?
What's coming up next is already here. And by that, I mean that everything that you just said is 100% true, that there's rating going on and people are dipping into other firms and companies for talent. It is very much a candidate market in many ways, but I talk to firms about being able to tell their story, the narrative of the firm, who they are, why they're a good place to work, what their belief system is like. That's what's going to draw candidates to you. What's going to push candidates away from you is strictly a money conversation, just a siloed workplace conversation. The firms that are doing very well have not returned to work, but they still are very, very connected to their people. I think in businesses like yours and mine, we're trying to find the right balance of being in touch with people electronically, but also giving them the personal attention that they deserve. For my purposes, I've started going back into the city 1 or 2 days a week for in-person meetings with, high-level attorney candidates. They all very much appreciate the FaceTime. They said, it's time to get out. I was feeling a little lonely. I was feeling a little put off. I feel somewhat disconnected from my firm, and I'm really seeking a firm I can be connected to. And what I tell them is the manner in which we all go about our business, video conferencing is a tool, just like email is a tool. It doesn't replace the in-person experience, and it will always be about the in-person experience. And those who can attract the most talented people are going to be those that can communicate that to the workforce best.
Where and when does an employer tell their story that you talked about earlier? Does that only really happen when there's an engagement process with a candidate, or is that more public, like on the firm's website, as example?
I think it's more public. I think it only gets reinforced by recruiters, or those working in the recruiting silo of a particular firm or company. I think that people have grown tired of what they see on websites or what they hear in press releases or Facebook posts or whatever. I think people want to see that something makes a particular company or firm different. And I have a great example going on. I have a big law client and a mid-sized law client. And the big law client is just pushing people through the process. They 1, 2, 3. The mid-sized firm client is really seeing who the individuals are, making them feel the love, making them feel like they're an important part of things, even though they may be the most junior associate or somebody on the support staff side. They're as important as the multi-million-dollar book of business partner or management committee member. The firms that are doing that are reinforcing that story, are the ones that are going to continue to attract top flight people, because larger entities will always be there. There'll always be a group of people that only want to work in large corporations or large law firms. It's now you have a lot of people, 2020 slapped them in the face with, I have parental responsibilities that I wasn't really focused on. I have the responsibilities of maybe caring for my aging parents that I wasn't really focused on. And this big company or big law job no longer does it for me. I'm still interested in doing interesting work. Now, if I can find an environment that's a little smaller, pays me just about as much, and I'm doing interesting work, sophisticated work with good people, that's now more important than ever.
Interesting. Yeah, I can certainly see that. So from a candidate's perspective, let's say, somebody's moved into a new area, they're looking for a job. So many options. I mean, electronic, you can go online and find jobs, whatever. You can answer ads. There's millions of employers. There's recruiters. How do you navigate that from, you've been working with people looking for positions as well as employers looking to fill positions. What advice would you give employees looking as they're coming into the workplace looking for a position? What would your advice be?
I would tell them trust their friends. Trust their friends to introduce them to other people. You cannot overestimate relationships. I always joke with people all the time. I had our websites built by some millennials, and they said, Mr. Sheppard, what is your core belief that we could put on your website? I said, that's easy. I said, we're not in the recruiting business and staffing business. We're in the relationship business. And if you have good relationships, timing and circumstance takes care of everything else. Now go build me 2 websites. and it was funny.
And stop calling me Mr.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking over my shoulder for my father. But interestingly, it really did touch on something that I think is very much talked about, but not developed. And that's the ability to meet different people from different areas of your life and engage in conversations that may or may not do anything for you in the short term. But over the long run, you've developed a group of acquaintances that one day down the road, that timing and circumstance will kick in with. And of course, everybody exhausts all the usual platforms, whether it's LinkedIn or websites of companies and firms that are looking for people, or recruiters like myself. All that is part of casting your net as wide as possible. The number one thing you should be doing is developing and maintaining those good relationships. Because if you do, you'll be very surprised how just out of nowhere, maybe at a cocktail party, you'll hear about something or somebody will talk to you, and it opens up a whole new chapter. And I tell people the story of how I got into the recruiting business was that I was dating a woman. I was 19. I was dating a gal whose boss was the owner of a recruiting company. And he said to me, do you think you could sell? And I said, sell what? He said, temporary help. And I said, what's that? And 40 plus years later, here I am. So you never know what direction a casual conversation will take you.
Yeah, great advice on personal relationships, casting a wide net. It's certainly true. I think too much for all ages, we rely too much on the digital side of our life, social media, that is, that are going to fix all the problems that we've got, including finding the right job and all of that. And I think you're absolutely on target with, talking to your most trusted advisors, your most trusted friends, your connections, and then their connections. And when you ask for help, it usually comes to you. You don't have to try too hard.
People want to help you.
Exactly.
People want to help you. I engage in a lot of conversation. I tell people, I'm happy to talk to that college grad just as much as I am that 20-year person, experienced person. And it's because they both have different things to bring to the table. And it's very, I tell the younger ones, especially, there was a time where the person you're connecting with was you. And somebody was helping them. And the digital age, it gives people the illusion that they're making more contacts and they're meeting more people, when in reality, say, for example, on LinkedIn, they're clicking on an icon. I tell people all the time, there was an old Seinfeld episode about when Jerry became friendly with Keith Hernandez, and he said, next thing Kramer said, you could be taking him to the airport. He said, I'm not taking him to the airport. And I always said, the litmus test for any connection on LinkedIn is, will they take you to the airport? And then you really know them well. But all kidding aside, there are relationships that you gain electronically, and it makes you a little bit lazy.
Yeah.
You don't take the time to call someone or video chat with a friend. You and I do it all the time. Like, hey, let's take 15 minutes and just bounce something around and stuff. And that goes a long way to developing the kind of relationships that are fruitful for everyone.
Yeah. And I got to say, you're very good at that, and following up and staying in touch and, poking everybody to say, hey, we haven't had a conversation in a while. And I think that's very, very good. And I think that that's a testament to you and your business skills as well.
Thanks. I tell people I have no other skill set. So.
You're very humble, John. I didn't have any further questions. Is there anything else that we missed or you want to kind of build on in the conversation?
No, I think, the parting message I would just want to give to anybody watching this would be that this is a time of great opportunity. It's an uncertain time. It's a challenging time beyond the pandemic, racial strife, economic woes, bad weather, everything else. But it's a time of tremendous opportunity also. Turn the page from the negative and move to the positive. Whether it's engaging to look for a job, engaging candidates that your firm is looking to hire. If you just make the extra phone call, send the extra email, and really take the time to engage on a personal level with people, I think it's going to come through. I think in the time we're in, people are starved again for human contact. And, I'm hoping I'm right.
Good perspective and good advice. Jon, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. It's been my pleasure.
And if somebody wanted to reach out and get in touch with you, how's the best way to do that?
Easiest way to do it is you could email me at jsheppard@jsheppardassociates.com, or certainly call me. My number is both on our website, as well as certainly any email you might send. So I look forward to hearing from people, and thank you for this opportunity, Gordon. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And I'll also put your contact info in the show notes and in the YouTube notes, so that if somebody's listening to this while they're on the treadmill and they want to get in touch with you, they can do that. So great conversation, Jon. Thank you. I'm Gordon Coyle. Thanks for watching and listening to the New York Business Leaders Podcast. If you have an interesting story that you'd like to tell on this podcast, let me know. Drop me an email, give me a call. I'll have my contact info in the show notes. And until next time, we'll see you.
That's it for this week's episode of the New York Business Leaders Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. In the meantime, find more interviews and resources at nybusinessleaders.com.